I think it's very important, that we kind of have conversations around how we look at history. See, when I speak to a mature audience like Khaki, because Khaki has got people who've been researching for the last 4 5 years, as well as freshers who are new to this. You have the best thing about Khaki, which I appreciate, is you have a full library of your own, which is so very important in understanding and reading the reading habit, which is otherwise, quite. Not really encouraged in several parts of society. I'm so happy that Khaki is driving the reading habit. So, this group of heritage evangelists, ambassadors, and a bit of the audience. See, I wanted to bring something which is more of an approach, a conceptual item, rather than tell you something that most of you would already know, because you people have a huge, very well constructed repository of knowledge. So I thought, let me bring something about how we look at the past, especially because politically, socially, economically, we are going through a churn. Okay, so uh, we all know what Urbs Prima and India stands for. We will go through some of those aspects and see how things have maintained or changed. Are we really aware of the totality of what happened in 19th century, 20th century, early 20th century, that period, or are we selective? I will also try and bring up some themes which I believe are under researched, because since you have a team and interested people and you have a library, chances are somebody will be able to add value to this in the future lectures. Next. So, what are the challenges in seeing the past in present terms? We are going through the context of Urbs Prima and Indus and its foundational themes. The first concern I have, see, as a resource person or a common person on the street, when I walk through, I travel by local train. I still travel by the legacy of the first train that ran in this city and country. I take local taxis, I take the buses. There are a lot of myths, there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of misconceptions which are there in the common populace. I'm very sure your team is doing the very best in kind of reading and bringing the right approach. But when we deal with a larger society, we are looking at a burning need, a seemingly burning need, a politicized approach to search for past quote unquote identities, either factual or imaginary. In this, what happens? We try to demonize or we try to deify some personalities or some themes, because we are looking for identities in the past. Certain identities which may not have existed in the past are also being created. So, when as heritage ambassadors, researchers, we start looking at things, are we taking the same trap? Are we kind of influenced by these WhatsApps and these Facebooks, and to say X person did something bad, Y person did something great, or vice versa? The other group may feel Y did something very bad and X did something very nice. So those kind of
Biju,
traps do exist today. The other thing which I invariably see when I'm out, I'm talking to people. People are trying to separate intertwined themes and indulgent selective highlights or obliteration also, which is a bit sad. If I walk into the State Bank of India ATM, there's nothing. I mean, they put all pictures of Imperial Bank and Bank of Bombay, but not a single thing on the people who founded them. They've started only with the Indians. Today, we are looking for individuality or plurality. That is another challenge. I mean, if you talk of a social reform education movement, we may we may either have
एस के मैस के
only
एस की मैस के बोलता है इसका
we may
एक
either
मिनट
have only a person highlighted X person, like or a Y person. The entire plethora is not going through. Very often when we look at one theme, if you look at a BMC, you look at the port trust, or you look at the overall constructions and all these things which have happened, again it is being very selective versus holistic. I mean, Khaki is expert on the BMC work. Obviously, you guys are conducting it. Okay, so uh, we will look at some of these themes and say who kind of created, co-created. What is it that as researchers we need to be looking at? Do we really need to fall trap to this isolation of themes and personalities? So we will go through each one of these themes. Okay. The next one is accepting the past academically. Is it possible? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. is accepting required. Today we may have issues, see, because each one of us comes from a certain vantage point. Like I came from Delhi. For me, different rulers of Bombay or Chennai or Delhi or Calcutta would have been equally neutral. I may not have a position, but somebody who's grown up in a space, somebody who's grown up in Girangaon will have a Girangaon view. Somebody who's grown up in the fort areas, Sobo, or probably in a community, X community, Y community, Z community, they will have a view on something. Like uh, if the coastal road is disturbing a particular community on the coast, they will have a view. So these views are fortunately or unfortunately inevitable. But when we bring it to academics, is it really required for us to dwell on them? Or we dwell on it, keep it aside, and then address to the task? I think that is something, no, the first slide only, we are still on the first. Okay, so that is one thought that I would always like to leave with the heritage ambassadors and the tour guides. Also, when we get on to the ground, is research tourism for furthering understanding of the past as it was, and the case for popular narratives versus academic narratives. Two standard examples, at least two or three people have told me Angre Fort was built by Kanauji Angre. There is no Angre Fort. INS Angre was HMS Dalhousie. It is an old manor, blah, blah, blah. All of us know the story. One good taxiwala from Dadar was telling me, since Shivaji Maharaj created this, everything good. I didn't know what to say because Chhatrapati had passed away just around the same time when Bombay was taking off. And while Vasai, Thane, Salsette, and all can be given that that historic angle, probably the fort of Bombay, the islands of Bombay weren't. So we need to be a little careful when we are dealing with public sentiments. But a lot of myths are going around. Okay, then it's important to understand foundational socio-economic political themes of Urbs Prima in this continuation of institutional history. This is very important. We are all dealing with institutional histories. We are dealing with, say, BMC, we are dealing with Naval Dockyard, we are dealing with Asiatic, we are dealing with university, we are dealing with High Court. These are all institutional histories. We're dealing with Elphinstone College and etc. 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 So is it really required and necessary for us to unentangle and delete parts, or we want to keep it all, then we want to bring it holistic? That thing has to resolve inside here. There are no right or wrong answers. Some of us will decide to our own sensibilities, academic sensibilities, based on our reading, what we want to speak. And yes, it's a free country. We are all free with our views. Also, in this whole story, the strong culture of harmonious diversity is very important. Whether it was Gerald Ongia, Bartle Frere, or today, whatever, that this is something we've been proud of from right from the early 17th century. So this is something when somebody comes from Delhi or other places, when I explain that here we don't ask religion, jat, path, this, that, blah, 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 then everyone helps you out. The BST conductor helps you out. Everyone helps you out here. For strangers, we are not a community driven, we are a cosmopolitan, and this has been there from day one. So this is something which is important to understand. How did we get here? This obviously started 200 years ago. We don't create urban cultures overnight. Okay, also in this talk, we are looking at missing and under-researched links in Urbs Prima and Indus, because several talks, walks, researches that we see do not really address the holistic perspective. Okay, so I will try and bring up some themes which some of you may like to have talks and walks on before in the future. Next, please. Okay, the undeniable construct of a colonial port city, because there is a lot of, in Urdu it's called fitna in people's minds. How much can we deal with the colonialism? Is it really required? Whatever, and they destroyed everything. They destroyed the country. This is a usual, thing. But then we need to understand each city has responded to colonialism in a separate way. Delhi responded differently. It was conquered. Lucknow responded differently. It was conquered. Surat responded differently, partly conquered, partly taken by trade, something else. Jaipur responded differently as a Maharaja's princely state. Bombay responded differently. Vasai responded differently. Bombay was an undeniable construct of a colonial poor city. Whether you read Prashant Kidambi, you read British authors, or you read Mira Kosambi, whatever, or Sharda Dwivedi, this is a city created for international trade by the East India Company and followed by the Crown. And the entire city, including Indians and Indians of all shapes and sizes in every region, everyone was welcome. Everyone made money in this city. This looking out of the shores, I mean, whether it was thanks to Suez Canal or to steam shipping and steam railways and whatever happened around the cotton boom, that entire construct is a colonial construct. Like it or not, it's a colonial construct. It's better to accept it and move on. Any of these institutions which were created in 19th century bear an undeniable imprint because of the urban geography, because of the communities that settled here. I mean, this is a story that all of you already know. One thing I will always bring it here, foreign and local investments, both were there. It is not that the British brought much money. A lot of Indians put a lot of much money. Then public-private investment. This is something which is very under-researched, under-known. Even if you talk about the Bombay port, we usually the story starts with 1873. I usually started a little before with Elphinstone Land Reclamation Company because it was a public-private. Everyone could buy shares there. It is not that it was only British, only Indian. A lot of scam happened around that also, which we will come. The founding of British Bombay, the principles of Gerald Ongia, I mean, all of you are very well aware. He very clearly said that there will be no religious discrimination and everyone was welcome here and protected here inside the walls or even outside the walls. The native town was obviously outside. And Bartle Frere continued there even after the fort was removed. The whole thing was given a very, very clear policy statement of freedom of religion, freedom of opportunity, equitable opportunity. There was no apartheid here. That's very important to understand because a lot of this, even, I mean, I do come across students as well. Uh, they say, loot ke chale gaye. But in Bombay, unfortunately, that narrative is not true because everyone made money out of it, whether indigo, whether opium, whether cotton. A lot of these Indian communities made money out of Bombay. So I think that storyline is something we'll have to come to terms with. And it's called comprador capitalism. It's not primary capitalism because a colonial network does not allow industry to flourish in the colony. That is something we have to accept because uh, the colony wants to sell products to the colony. The colony needs to be rich enough to buy, but not be allowed to manufacture. That is a British model. So it is not to kind of make it impoverished. If you make it impoverished, the market will not exist for British goods, right? So it is a fine balance that the company and the crown also maintain that keep this movement so active that a lot of people make a lot of money in terms of the feeder businesses. So the equitable opportunity, like if you go to the town hall, not the Asiatic side, the other side, you have Charles Forbes statue, and the inscription is in Gujarati and English. Okay, so that is typically Urbs Prima for you. So in the same time, the age of science, globalization of science, impact of steam railway, shipping and industry, whatever was happening abroad, if you have Stephenson creating the steam engine, Stephenson's son was involved in GIPR. He was running a company called Vulcan Foundry. If you have somebody called Mers putting the London Underground in electric, the same Mers was involved in our Kurla to CST, that first thing. People who are making pipelines and all that in municipalities in UK, same technology came when Bihar Water Works, Tulsi, etc. All that came. So a lot of this commonality of technology and 1854 onward, the steam technology, the cotton processes, they were heavily dependent on international machinery and the technology. What are the great enablers of commerce? Because the Victorian Empire prided itself on commerce. If you see the South Kensington Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the central pediment carries a 1851 great exhibition, and it clearly says commerce a great enabler in several other nice long words, but this is what it effectively says. Come to CST, you have progress, science, commerce, agriculture together today. And of course, it had Victoria in the center earlier, now removed. We really don't know what happened of it. These remain relevant to Bombay even today. These may have been created as relevant for the Victorian Empire, but today they remain relevant for Bombay. And they're relevant, whatever government is there, whatever, these are the 4 or 5 critical things that are required. So certain bit of continuity we see when Bombay becomes independent and becomes a financial hub of the country as well. Now, specific examples that we will introspect upon: BMC, medical services and hospitals, judicial courts, education and social reform movement, banking and financial services, ports and docks and mills. We will breeze through several of these items. We will bring new names, some names you would already know. Let us see if we kind of are able to put things together. Just hold it there. Let me ask a few questions. Some of you can unmute if you have the answers. Just to keep the kind of tempo on. We usually say British created Bombay. I obviously say no, it's a co-creation because this debate I have with several people outside of Bombay. Oh, it's a British city. No, 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 it's not a British city. It's an Indian city co-created with the British policy. There is a certain, sharing, even technology, everything. So let me ask you a few questions. So any of you know the answer, just unmute and give it. If you don't know, we'll continue with the presentation and all these answers will come. Let me ask you the first question. Can you name the doctor truly reminiscent of the spirit of science prevalent in Urbs Prima and Indus, being educated in Bombay, went on to manage 26 outbreaks of plague, 16 of smallpox, 6 of cholera, contributed as a key pioneer in Author Road Hospital, Maratha Plague Hospital. The clue, he was also knighted for his contribution eventually. 5 seconds, anyone has?
Nasarwanji.
Yes, Sir Nasirwanji Hormuzji Choksi. Thank you. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay. One more I will ask. Okay, because let's move on to judicial services. Lady graduate of Bombay with a law degree from Oxford, rare activist for a female representation in legal progression in courts, the legal profession, the progression of the legal profession, a pioneer in legal services for Parda women, cautiously helping on social reform, but without causing political or social disruption. Retired from the High Court finally after having facilitated a milestone in British and Indian law profession. Who are we talking about? Anyone? The Khaki team, you have the answers. I'll just ask anybody else to answer.
It's a Parsi lawyer called Cornelia something. I don't remember the second name.
Yeah. Cornelia. That's right.
Cornelia Sorabji.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. Next one on the same lines. Mumbai was known for textile mills, we know from 1854. By 1920s, I'm taking a midpoint because it's like, several decades of evolution. Approximately how many do we think were British owned in the city of Mumbai out of the total? I'm just saying very approximately. It could be way off, but plus minus, whatever. Wild guess, anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. The answer is 14 out of 53. The rest were Indian. This is approximately 1925. Okay, could be 2 or 3 here and there, but that's the time. That's the reading that we have. Okay, next one I will ask you again. Now everyone talks of lords, ladies, big ships, big factories, huge monumental buildings. All that is Urbs Prima, right? Let's talk of something more humble. A pioneer of labor, social welfare movement in Bombay at heyday of capitalist, colonial, and Indian ventures. Just remember, we are not just a port city, we are an industrial port city. That is Urbs Prima in India. 1854 onwards, we're an industrial port city. So you can't have port without labor. So obviously, we're talking about labor social welfare movement. Leader of All India Trade Union Congress, ITAC, in All India Trade Union Federation. I mean, he's one of the pioneer founders or pioneers in the beginning. And the Bombay Textile Labor Union, one of the founding fathers of labor movement, a believer in communal harmony in politics. Last sentence, very, very, very important. Believer in communal harmony. Who are we talking about? 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyone? Okay, I'll give you a guess. There's a road in Lower Parel named after him.
Is it P. de Mello?
No, Lower Parel is N.M. Joshi.
Of course.
So P.D. Mello, I would say, is Fort or Balad Estate. Okay, I'll progress again. A great engineer, pioneer of Bombay Port Trust in initial planning years of Princess and Victoria docks, executed by his brother. Basically, the plan executed by his brother, and he himself became a consulting engineer and a faculty of University of Bombay, while his brother still worked in the port. Which brothers are we talking about? Because obviously port city hai, so I want to bring this to the fore. Because I'm trying to bring a new angle, an angle that everyone knows, but the one I'm stressing is there are people of different types who have contributed. Which brothers are we talking about? And this is one of the few statues not removed from where it belonged to. There are very few statues which have not been moved or broken. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm talking of Ormiston brothers. Ormiston, Ormiston. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. We'll come back to a few questions later. See, you all have enough of data on BMC, so I will just keep it fast. When we look at the list of president, chairman, mayor, see, mayor comes, the designation comes later, but it derives from what, one of the positions in the past. They represent the quintessential co-creation of an institution. It's very, very important. It's a medley mix of administrators from multiple castes, religions, nationalities, and communities, part of municipal governance. Today, we cannot go and just ascribe it to Crawford. We cannot ascribe it only to Ferozshah Mehta. We can't ascribe it to 1, 2, 3 people here and there. As often as people attempted to do, it will be very unfair. I think each year, each couple of years, each 5 years, 10 years, there has been significant change and improvement in the municipal governance, and we are proud to have this kind of a governance. So let's take a few people. I mean, this is a random, list that I did because the list is very, very vast. Okay, so across decades, not an exhaustive list. Sir Arthur Crawford, undeniably, I mean, it's pre-BMC days, but obviously this is where the story begins. Strangely, he had to leave the job because an editor, Times of India editor, went and had a huge quarrel with him due to increase of taxes, standing in the town hall. Despite his position and all that, for whatever reason, he quit. Sir Ferozshah Mehta, undeniably a pioneer, founder, co-founder, whatever. Let's think about somebody like Hancock Bridge. I'm sure some of you remember. Captain George F. Henry. Look at Deputy Surgeon Cook. It's a very, see, look at, there are doctors, there are lawyers, there are different kind of people who are into this. There are administrators. We know V.N. Mandlik. There's a Mandlik Road near the Taj Mahal Hotel, right? Mandlik Road. Sir George Cotton. We remember George Cotton. I think in St. Thomas Cathedral, his family donated something. So, George Cotton. Balchandra Bhattavadekar. Deensha Vacha. Sir Chunnilal Mehta. Chunnilal Mehta is a pioneer of the Bombay Stock Exchanges in some different roles. Sir Sassoon David, Mirza Muhammad Ali Khan. Look at all religions flowing in. Kawasji Harmuzji, Rahimtullah Muhammad Sayani, Muncherji Murzban, the great Murzban, the architect. V.D. Thackeray, Joseph Baptista, Rahimtullah Karimboy, Boman Behram, V.N. Chandravarkar. Chandravarkar obviously is a very, very big figure. Elijah Moses, Khurshid Framji Nariman, Chintamani Javle, Nagindas Master. We know the Nagindas Master Road, right, at Kalagoda. S.K. Patil, we know, G.V. Deshmukh, Yusuf Meher Ali. There is no end to understanding this. Whatever way you look at it, at every period, BMC has been co-created. This is a classic example of a co-created administration and a culture. Let's go next. So when we go inside BMC, I think it's important to highlight that it cannot be always, certain things cannot be cut out. I would not ever recommend, isolation or obliteration, because we are all researchers here. And, and I do know the kind of work that you guys do, the kind of library you use. And I think we need to kind of, get that larger narrative, the common people do not know that. I think it's important for us to highlight it. So British municipal governance model of early modern industrial and port cities with its best technology then was deployed. Waterworks, new roads, municipal taxes, and even a toll. I mean, Duncan Causeway had a toll from the beginning. So whenever people abuse the toll, I say, no, it starts that old, 1800, 1804 types. So all your waterworks and all, obviously, Henry Conybeare's time, we know how it came. It was very expensive. Bombay Fort didn't have water. All that story we know, the Tulsi pipeline and Tamsa and all that, right? So this is very typically the kind of technology that was imported. We have a vast expanse of parks, bridges, and roads and sewage. Considering the complexities of burgeoning population and pressures, the essential facilities still work. Bridges, municipal/railway bridges of Urbs Prima and Indies have stood the test of time, though decommissioned now largely. I mean, if you go to Nesbitt Road, you'll have an Olivent Bridge. Olivent is a municipal guy. He was not a railway guy. Hancock Bridge we have, right? We still have these names here and there. Now, something which I don't really feel happy about is destruction of heritage. I was looking at Urbs Prima and Indies, the stained glass, because we know stained glass existed in the Council Hall and Darbar Hall from whatever we read. But when I read Jude Holliday's stained glass, it clearly states the piece de resistance, the magnum opus artwork of a stained glass window of the council room, the Urbs Prima and Indies crest, because the crest was so important. I think the politicians, when the local politicians, when they took over, they must have said, I don't know what happened. It's not found. It has been replaced. The thing has been just taken off. Okay. Now it is said to be removed or discarded. We don't even know that. Obviously, some politician somewhere, this pseudo xenophobic stuff that suddenly comes, we end up destroying history. I mean, I know that Victoria Memorial, even in Calcutta, is being destroyed. Even they want to remove Victoria out of it. Sometimes you got to accept the past. We're not saying you have to worship the past or glorify the past, but some things have to be accepted and moved on. A piece of art, a stained glass, and this was not a sovereign symbol. None of us can have a sovereign symbol in a government office, because that's not allowed. You cannot have another country's sovereign symbol in your government space. But end of the day, if there are non-sovereign symbols and they're in museums and other spaces, somewhere as researchers, because we bring a lot of pressure onto society, and also what we said is advocacy, right? I think that is one angle we must remember. Don't destroy whatever has happened in the past. Now, the plaque also does not have a crest. The plaque, when you enter the staircase, even that, there is no crest onto it. I don't even know if it ever had a crest, but there is a clear space where it looks scraped. So that's important. Similar. We need to be careful to highlight these things also, which are unpleasant, right? Because end of the day, we are heritage evangelists. So it is important at whatever age, position, contribution we do. It's important to recognize these aspects of multiple years, and it is not that this has happened just now. It's several years before also such things would have happened. Maybe several decades ago. Maybe in the previous, in the colonial regime also it could have happened. It's important to understand the palimpsest, important to understand the validities, the official stances, what has changed. Continuity is important. So in this thing, I always say Tulsi pipeline, reservoirs, bridges, roads, causeways, this is also heritage. This is very much heritage. And I am taking my personal time out and trying to get as many places as possible I'm able to see before they all go away. I think our true calling is beyond monumentality, also to address these larger areas in urban geography. When we're talking of municipal areas, the calling is to bring out the heritage value and the original narrative, places in its own context. Okay, next slide. We'll move to another topic which not many people have got into. I think Mridula Ramana is the most common author that we all read. See, when plague happened, everyone remembered Arthur Road Hospital, right? So it's a historic introduction in city with the plague. And this is a typo here, my mistake. It's a plague, not the plague. Kasturba Hospital, of course. Continued evolution and commitment. At that point in time, when medication did not exist, how did the city react to the plague? You'd be shocked and surprised to know our reaction was similar to what we did during COVID, because we did not understand COVID. A lot of people went into severe difficulty. The way they went into difficulty now is the same way they went into difficulty then. Somewhere, some studies and some conversations have happened that the British destroyed and they didn't handle. The same thing happened all over the world in 2020. Nobody could handle it. And the fact that whatever was possible to do was done: fumigation, cleaning up, and checking medical before onboarding ships, municipal issues, clearing of that whole native town, that slum. I mean, that Bora Bazar area had a very slum, kind of a very bad air. Is what they say. They needed to bring ventilation and needed to bring sunlight. So a lot of those things happened. Several historic hospitals were set up around that time, plus minus a few years, and that experience ensured that we need more hospitals. Around 1912, there is this whole uh, fight about who constitutes medicine. Either it is a traditional Indian Ved, and a lot of people today are in that hallucination that traditional medicine is so much better. At that point in time, we had a history, yes, but with the modern medicine coming, antibiotics came post independence only, but with modern medicine taking control about the entire world, there is this huge conflict about Western slash modern versus Indian traditional medicine. Again, it's a mindset. Even today in certain cities like where I live, people do not want to go to a modern doctor. They'd rather die in front of a local quack than go to a modern doctor. It's a mindset. 1912, the Medical Act, a lot of legislation happened around 1910 to 1915. It's very important to understand that modern medicine took its took its first pioneer steps around that time, because modern medicine, how and what constitutes a medical profession was defined legally at that point in time. While we trace our proud history of medical science from Grant College time, right? Because Grant himself as a governor was a great promoter of medical sciences. He wanted that hospital, and unfortunately he died before it could be opened, while he had done everything to promote it. So at that point in time, you talk about Sir JJ, the key role of Jagannath Shankar Sheth, Sir JJ, and then you put together people like Charles Moorhead. These are the doctors: John Peet, H.J. Gerard, Henry V.C. Dyke Carter. These are all great doctors who had contributed to this faculty. And Bhavdaji, we know he studied there and he came out, right. He was a medical associate. Atmaran Pandurang. This movement from traditional belief and traditional science to a modern science, Bombay has played a very, very historic role. Okay, so that is something which we have unfortunately over time, we have forgotten the science that Urbs Prima stood for. We talk about money all the time, monumentality all the time, science. So Kasturba Hospital, let's talk about Ackworth Leprosy Hospital. Ackworth was again a municipal guy. We have Kaman Albes, St. George, Gokuldas Tejpal. These are all historical places. KEM and the Indian Modern Medical Renaissance. Now, sometimes it is put forward saying that in JJ, they did not allow Indians to go up. The reality is there was a fear that it was not apartheid. It was simply that there is this Indian medical service. There is a it's like IAS and all that we have, right? So Indian medical service was a British service that they instituted for India. The key roles, all your surgeon general, your deputy surgeon and all that were those roles only, because these were administrative roles. The fear was there was this lot of pushback against modern medicine. So somewhere they did not want this 1912 kind of a situation again to come when there was this huge tussle. But all said and done, KEM was again, while it is named after Edward, this was largely Indian, because while there was nothing not in bringing Britishers there, but end of the day the management was also Indian here. This led to an Indian modern medical renaissance. I think that connection is very, very important. Like Hafkin, we all know the story. That also happened around the same time. So, so these stories have to be kind of tied in together when we say what does Urbs Prima stand for? These are foundational themes of science. No city exists without science. For example, in 1911, we had the Indian Research Fund Association under Sir Harcourt Butler, the foundation of the ICMR, what we know as ICMR. So that eventually kind of, if you talk about the FD Petit lab, this pathology department was used by Hafkin for the famous plague vaccine. So there's so much which has happened in Urbs Prima. 1912, the medical journal started. And later on, by 1949, Dr. C.G. Pandit, he took over, he made it, to what it is now. Let's talk about Dr. Choksi, great doctor, tutor of, he used to teach in Grant, later became medical superintendent of Arthur Road Hospital, for long a pioneer in controlled clinical trials, very, very important. Dr. Carter, head of Grant, was very fond of his student and later his colleague. He was a pioneer in treating uh, plague, smallpox, and cholera. Was awarded Khan Bahadur later and knighted later, and he worked in Maratha Plague Hospital. The BMC Commissioner Ackworth had deputed him in the leprosy hospital. So John Andrew Turner, health activist, and he worked together. Look at this. This is typical Urbs Prima in Indies. I don't know how many of you remembered this name, because I think it's important to bring out these heroes as well. Okay, let's go to the next. Let's then touch on to judicial services. Judicial services, see, we know the story, Recorder's Court, and then it goes into the Supreme Court and High Court. So I'm not getting into the actual storyline. Judicial services necessitated understanding of old customs, rules, laws, and to be placed in context of new judicial framework, separating criminal, civil. This is very, 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 very important, because in traditional Indian judicial sciences, this demarcation of judge being independent was not there. Separation of judiciary from executive. Now the East India Company had judges being appointed by the king directly. They could give judgments against the government, the local government, and all their authorities and all also. Civil and criminal laws were separated between 1861 and 69. Now, whether you call it Bharatiya Sanhita, whatever the truth is, these are actually derived from global judicial practices, because criminal means a state versus somebody, civil means a family members or the community inquirer. It is within the same community, so you are governed by your community law. British were very, very careful not to touch community law, because unless that kind of support and that was a commitment, policy commitment they made, that we will not be interfering in religion and customs, except sati. I don't think, and a few things, and female infanticide and all, very rarely did they intervene in social practice. So all this brought the need for jury, barristers, solicitors, the imminent need for modern legal qualification for Indians to participate in the judicial process. Most importantly, we had a legal process appeal, appellate court process, equality before law. That is something which is commendable. This is very typically, this came at that time. See, earlier, if you had certain qazis or certain muftis or certain certain people went by the Dharma Shastras and all, there will be caste, creed, I mean, if you go by, I mean, certain, I don't want to name that ancient Indian text, because it'll hurt a lot of religious sentiments, but it clearly says certain castes have to be punished differently. Okay, so a lot of these things get removed when Urbs Prima gets formed, because this is having equality before law. Anyone who had a big fat purse to hire a fat lawyer could win a case, provided argument and evidence. It all just needed fat amounts of money in the court, right? Priority of evidence and argument. So this put the Indian law-educated elite in the same league as British practitioners in practice. We have something called uh, justice of peace, composition and views. I mean, this obviously requires a lot more study as to what was the composition of the several people across justice of peace. So this collaboration is very, very heavy in judicial services. Okay, let's talk about somebody like Telang. We have somebody like Telang. We have somebody like Badruddin Tyabji. We have Bombay Law Society since 1894. We have M.G. Ranade, P.V. Kane, Ambedkar, Lokmanya Tilak, Vallabhbhai Patel, Vittalbhai Patel, Ferozshah Mehta, all premium lawyers. Cornelia Sorabji, of course, we did touch upon that. Plethora of collective experience and knowledge in all areas of litigation in an expanding population with diverse commercial and personal cases. Law education from Bombay is still considered very premium, right? So this is very typically Urbs Prima. It continues to go on. Next. Social reform educational policy, there are very, very harsh debates even now as to why English, why not Marathi. Let's just remember the social reform movement was very, very important under Elphinstone, Mount Stuart Elphinstone. The bilingual, trilingual, and the bringing of vernacular textbooks, and there is this huge movement by Indians to set up schools and to contribute money to running schools and to ensure people of all caste communities could attend a school. This was unthinkable in the past. The Peshwa and all used to contribute 5 lakhs to Brahmin for Brahminical education. All the madrasas used to contribute to their own people. Fathers probably and all the people, missionaries used to run churches. There's something called common education where anyone could go. This is a turning point in the history of Urbs Prima and Indus. It is an Indian educational renaissance. We cannot talk of this without Mount Stuart Elphinstone, and we cannot then say only Mount Stuart Elphinstone. There are reams of books on this. We have to talk about Jagannath Shankar Sheth. We have to talk about JJ. We have to talk about several local Marathi authors who got together to create Marathi textbooks. For the first time, we had Marathi books. It's called a vernacular, obviously. So Gujarati was also there. Foreign, the global maths was there, science was there. So this whole thing has to be seen as a continuum. Today we have this very, very irresistible urge to take positions based on our own position and social group in present life, which I really want to say that there has to be an easy way to deal with this. We have to see it in entirety. The good books, Ornament to the City, there are several books on this, which bring all the names. Even Jagannath Shankar Sheth's autobiography by Shirodkar has enough and more names which are given there, 1,000 pages. Introduction of vernacular. Now, what also hated or appreciated is that culture of Sarkari Nokri. Mount Stuart Elphinstone, Charles Wood, everybody is very clear. We want to create the middle class who can help us administer. Rightly or wrongly, it created that privilege and premium on Sarkari Nokri, which remains still independence and after that also. Now, whether we like it or not like it, it is important that it create that aspirational group of students, and present political divide is something I think as researchers and heritage ambassadors, we need to be careful to stay away from, because we are not here to kind of, take that side instantly. We need to see it in holistic. Because when we explain the 19th century situation where certain caste community, girls, etc., could not go to school, this was revolutionary. I think the Bengal education movement has deservedly got its, academic, highlight. I don't think the Bombay educational movement has yet got so much. I think it is still within the confines of colleges and classrooms. When we take it out on the street to meet people from outside and everywhere, I think this is important to bring. Charles Wood Dispatch, creating a grand university. It's important to remember 1857, North was burning. 1857 was peaceful in Mumbai except for two executions. A large portion of Mumbai celebrated when the Queen's government took over. There was lighting, etc. This is a different city. It is not because of anything good, bad, ugly. We cannot look at 1857 with 2024 eyes and with our present nationalities, groups, and everything. At that point of time, what happened is what we will have to refer to. That's very important. The Gothic building comes later, but minus any ecclesial Christian symbolisms, the convocation hall, and very typically church-like things. But they've steered clear of any cross and Jesus and IHS and Mary and stuff like that. When we look at who contributed, let's look at the mixed ethnic contribution. Wood, of course, Charles Wood, John Wilson, Herbert Birdwood, R.G. Bhandarkar, Bartle Frere, Chandravarkar, Firoz Mehta, Rustam Masani, M.C. Chagla. Chagla is that High Court pioneer, P.V. Kane, and in architectural funding, of course, we know Kawase Jahangir and Prem Chandra Roy Chand. Significant Indian contribution to education cause, supported by government policy and push as well. We need to appreciate and highlight this diversity, not a selective view, but a holistic view. That's the request that I have. If you look at histories of Wilson College, Elphinstone College, Xavier's, Sir JJ, the multiple complexes, Ruia, Sydenham, Royal Institute of Science. Now that Royal went, now Institute of Science is also gone. They put a new board. Most of them had influence of government policy and or support of the administrative elite, and some with Indo-British investment and promotion within Indians across diverse communities. That entire building of the Institute of Science was contributed by people of several religions. I think you can look that up, but then I just wanted to bring that angle. Next. Banking and financial world, we know about Premchand Roy Chand. He started this stockbroking in what is now Hanuman Circle. The entire scam of borrowing money from his own bank, where he was a director, and lending it to people for buying shares, which he was inflating and selling, the entire network of spiral of upward pushing of shares. This is the US Civil War's cotton boom, Elphinstone land reclamation, and finance companies putting money in bank share going up, borrowing money against that, put it in real estate shares. That entire spiral goes up. When the stock market comes down due to cotton prices returning to normal, the entire city crashes. This is the first scam that the country went through. Very critical scam. There was a Jackson committee right up in Parliament in Westminster, which sat. It indicted three directors who were VIP positions in the imperial government in Calcutta for malgovernance. Premchand Roshan was not indicted because he technically had not committed a crime. He had only influenced, but end of the day, he was a linchpin. So this story, unfortunately, has now been forgotten because that whole concept of how banking, auditing, governance, that story, Premchand Roshan did a wonderful job in being a philanthropist, nothing wrong. But I think when we talk of this banking and financial world, this is the story of the fall of Bank of Bombay. It's important to bring. Its liquidation. Both British and Indians benefited as well as committed wrongdoing together. It is not that Premchand did it all together. The manager of Bank of Bombay was obviously British. Half the directors were British. Half the people he lent to were British, right? So it is not that it was Indian, British, and that divide doesn't exist when it comes to getting greedy for money. Now let's talk about banks like Exchange Bank. Many people have this feeling foreign bank didn't employ Indians, ruled over Indians. Absolutely wrong. Chartered Bank, I know for sure, even Sorabji Pochkanwala's uncle was a chief accountant equivalent, very, very senior position. In today's world, it would be an AVP or a DVP or a VP equivalent. He had and he had an elder brother there. And he also learned that all this rank and file were all Indians. Only promoters were foreigners, because obviously you're dealing with Indians. We're dealing with money. So you need local staffing. So this apartheid did not exist anywhere, right? Let's talk about the first chartered bank. There are people, when I go for a banking walk, chartered bank, which everyone says Chartered Bank of India, Australia and China. No. Jagannath Shankar Sheth opened a bank called Bank of Western India. That becomes Old Oriental Bank, as in the old, we added later academically, it's the Oriental Bank. That got the first charter by chance because they went and bought Bank of Ceylon. These stories have to be known because these are co-created economies of an Urbs Prima way of working. Swadeshi banking, we have forgotten because we again talk about big banks, foreign banks. Swadeshi banks, Sasun David, Ratan Tata, Sorabji Pochkanwala. We have people like Khatau, Ambalal Sarabhai coming to open banks like Bank of India. But Bank of India was very clear. Shapurji Brosha says, I want a British manager. I don't want an Indian manager. There was no apartheid. They wanted a British manager because they knew better credit policy. And similarly, Indian banks are no problem. They used to employ Britishers wherever they wanted. There was no such problem at all. It is just that they had to get the formula right. Unfortunately, many banks floundered because of the RBI not being there at that point in time. Swadeshi banking, I think that's a story worth telling because that's again Urbs Prima whether you talk about Central Bank, Bank of India, all this is 1906, 1910, 11, 12, right? It falls fairly into our own thing. Let us talk about biggest names in global and Bombay banking. Sir Osborne Arkell Smith, first governor of Reserve Bank. Sir Purushottam Das Thakur Das, Ahmad Habib Boy. Purushottam Das Thakur Das has been part of too many political, social, big stuff. Ahmed Boy, Habib Boy, Imperial Bank, R.D. Tata, Ferosha Mehta. Ferosha Mehta was chairman Central Bank of India. We've forgotten that. Sir William Murray, Sir Philip Brown. These are all people. Allahabad Bank, State Bank, Imperial Bank. Lalubhai Samaldas was one of the founders of Bank of India too. Khatau, Sir C.D. Deshmukh, we know Deshmukh because of the Churchgate name change controversy, but of course Deshmukh was very, very important as a deputy governor, and he oversaw RBI while it transited from public shareholding to nationalization. Mixed group of investors made bank run and the city rich. We cannot unentangle this wonderful kaleidoscope of multi-ethnic, multi-religion personalities working together in great wealth creation. True spirit of Urbs Prima is in banking and finance. So this is something which we have lived. When you see past to present, this remains in the present the way it is. Go to the next slide. Let's talk about mills and capitalism and labor movement. Mills, I think a lot of work has happened. Unlike rest of India, where Indians were discouraged by colonial framework for local industrialization, Bombay had significant Indian investments and stock joint holding too for mills. Cotton business end-to-end across all processes from raw to finished was done in mini mills. Huge mill-centric economy, urban development, population inflow, industrial culture, including chawls. Like we said, 53 mills we had in 1925, only 14 were with British. Out of 386 directorships, only 44. This is largely comprador capitalism. Technology was at par with British mills, imported machinery, fast adapting Indian labor. Labor movement, we just touched upon N.M. Joshi. I think we need to also have the idea of globalization of labor movement concept. Whatever was happening in Britain or Europe was also happening in India. None of this is to be seen in isolation. So this is part of an Urbs Prima narrative. No, this is one narrative which has been removed by politicians now. Because there is this book by Rajnarayan Chandravarkar which says how the left movement, the academic focus and whatever happened, and that whole thing changed into the current culture. So there are studies around that, but the reality is P.D. Mello is forgotten, Dange is forgotten, several other leaders who led the social welfare mission. So this is something that is an Urbs Prima and Indies I always try bring in whenever we talk about. The contribution of mills in history is now being obliterated in wake of real estate booms on mills land. They are just known for controversies and politics rather than for what they brought. Next. Transportation, I think everyone knows about the railway story. I will not get too much into it. It's important to understand. Some people have told me that it was brought by the British colonial imposition. See, I have this habit of talking about this after, at big day's work. I'm going home on the same train. Koi na koi mil jata hai, I have a conversation. So I always say, see, there was this great meeting that happened in the town hall where the Asiatic is. And Bombay as Rail Association was formed, and Jagannath Shankar Sheth, Gigi Boy, several others. We wanted the train service. Indian businessmen wanted the train service. Nothing could have happened without Indian entrepreneurship co-opting, collaborating with the British capitalism. Now, for good or for bad, it was collaboration and the joint co-creation. So the railway introduction debate had begun in the town hall, 1845, with Indians participating. Now, then somebody again then comes and tells me over a few drinks somewhere else, no, 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 only Jagannath Shankar Shet created. I said, no, 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 it doesn't work that way, because then you have to say Dalhousie because he created the minutes. You have Lord Reay because in 1880s he created a lot of infrastructure around. We have Elphinstone. We have JJ. Obviously, we have Jagannath Shankar Shet. We have James Berkeley. James Berkeley is a railway engineer. We have forgotten engineers. Kennedy, French, Hancock, James Berkeley, these are people who were inspectors and who were engineers. It's not the administrators who create everything. We forgot an engineer. So when we look at the holistic way, I think the storyline is different. It is often intensive, efficient labor, work, contract. All contractors were Indian. A lot of work has happened. Like we have Rita Bambi's book on that. So a lot of stuff has happened. The Indian contribution also needs to be known. A lot of people died on the Borga trying to make that bridge, right? So these are multilingual, multi-ethnic stories. It is not a single storyline of removing this, removing that, and showing something. I think we need to recognize that. I remember this every time I take a train from CST, which I intend to do in some time now. So the Indo-British Joint Labour Force in Railway, famous efficient maintenance of railways, historic mechanical units in Parel, Elphinstone, Matunga, Kalyan, etc. These are Indian man shops. It is not that everyone, we had a lot of Britishers, of course, but it is important to kind of put together this narrative. Next one. Okay, so that is about the railways. You talk about dry docks. Obviously, you all know about the Bombay government dry dock, you know, the Wadia technical staffing, and then we have Mazgaon, civil as well as naval. The story is very well known, but obviously it's important to bring it as a co-creation. It is not a one-sided, something that we are comfortable, uncomfortable, and suddenly remove something, and we want to deny the origin of these institutions. Bombay Port Trust also had Kesavji Nayak as one of the first trustees. I don't think we remember Kesavji Naik today. Ballard, of course, we remember. He has a plaque in St. Thomas Cathedral, which I obviously point out to. Like we understand Kesavji Naik, we also have to understand Bahu Lakshman Ajinkya. Sir B. Rao. Sir B. Rao rebuilt the port during the 1944 blast, okay, during World War. It was so big contribution. General Ballard, we all know. Sassoon, we know. W. Nicol, we've forgotten because we now call the road Kamani Road. He was the promoter behind Elphinstone Land Reclamation Company and also director of the Chartered Bank later. Ormiston Brothers, we talked about. Merweather, we have forgotten. Merweather dry dock got reclamation into reclamation, when the port was closed. Bartle Frere was a brain behind creating new wet docks and dry docks. I mean, he obviously left before it happened. Large Indian investment in Elphinstone Land Reclamation Company stock. This was one of the Bombay scam stocks also, right? So when we create a storyline, it's important. Peninsular Oriental, BASN, that story. Now in the shipping story, obviously there is a huge colonial push. They don't want Indian shipping. 40, 50, 60 years, Indian shipping struggled to come up because they used to undercut prices. Funny part, there was never any policy on apartheid. Nobody told Tata you cannot buy a ship and run it. They allowed him to buy two ships and run it. Tata NYK, okay, two ships NYK, two ships Tata. Immediately P&O went and reduced his prices so much, nobody went to the Tata ship, everyone went to P&O ship. It is unfair trade practice due to colonialism, but there was no apartheid. One needs to remember this. Then Scindia comes with his own narrative. Scindia shipping, Lalubhai Samaldan Mehta, Walchand Hirachan, Narottam Morarji. Scindia shipping, April 5th, 1919, beginning of Indian shipping. In complete rebellion, he takes a huge bunch of VIPs, including administrators, everyone who could book a passage to London. Unfortunately, ship didn't reach London very fast. It had a breakdown, etc. But that's the national maritime story. Okay, that's a National Maritime Day, April 5th. And we know where it started from. When you look at the newspapers, we know where it started from. We have forgotten these Urbs Prima stories today. Okay, because it is not a British story, it's not an Indian story, it's a co-created story. Next. So architecture, it's a cliche to repeat the obvious because you all know all the data and we are at 7 o'clock, next 5 minutes, I'll try and finish. Cliche to repeat the obvious, global great architects at work in Bombay, George Whitted, Frederick Stevens, Charles Stevens, Augustin Fuller, Tracy, Claude Batley, Gregson Batley and King of that fame, Murzban, Begg, Cowper. Along with this, we also have to remember Sorabji Bedware, Gajanan Matre, Master Sate Bhutta, We have so many other names, and we also have names like Khanderao Vaidya, we have Mirza, we have Murzban, so important. And one of my friends, Isha Sheikh, is doing a lot of research. You can see it on Instagram on contractors of Bombay. So that's a fabulous piece of research happening by him and his friends. I think it's bringing to fore the people who actually built stuff, not only the people who designed. That is so important in Urbs Prima and Indus. People who embellished, people who built. I think that is a story that needs telling. And thankfully, many of my friends are telling these stories, and I am at the receiving end to learn. So architectural style was important. Neoclassical first, followed by Victorian Gothic at its best, cannot be dealing from city history. It is colonial, yes. Later mixed with Indian Indo-Saracenic, and Indo-Saracenic had strong proponents in Britain. Art Deco had a mix of Indian architects working on global styles, evolving together. We have a Claude Bailey also there. We have a lot of Indians in JJ and everywhere else who are creating, the new buildings on Marine Drive. They are creating buildings on PM Road. And Art Deco, trust you all know, Art Deco Mumbai has a lot of information. I don't need to tell you the names. All names are there. Urban Bombay was a microcosm of global styles. I think that's an Urbs Prima story. Significant contribution of Indian contractors, we said. Now, somewhere in the story, native town architecture, which is heavily urban, as in space saving, it was yet stylistically Konkan or regional styles depending on promoters and residing communities. We still had Vadas and Vadis. Not many of them are still there now, but there are studies, and this is something which I think we could explore into in future. This is important to understand. A co-creation of Urbs Prima is not only Sobo, it is also the native town. When you go to this road between Manish Market and Bhuleshwar, you will have mosques, Agyaris, Jain mandirs, other mandirs, Mumba Devi, everything on the same road. And they've lived peacefully for 300 years. So it's a mix of native town understanding and the fort area, the administrative monumentality. It is required to understand Urbs Prima and Indus. I think as heritage evangelists, this mix is always important. It is never one side of the story. Next. So to conclude, next 5 minutes, I will just get into, just to tie these threads together, because I don't want to make this too long. And many of you have all the data. I was just trying to, share my concerns that things are becoming too selective and not holistic. See, we have two choices. Either we join the political bandwagon, depending on which political leaning you have. There are some leftists, rightists, there are imperialists. Today, all those isms are still available in our mind. But when we want to get onto the floor as researchers, how much do we want to be impressioned and imprisoned by the past? Or do we want to look at things the way they were in a holistic way, give credit where due, try not be judgmental? I think that's important as a researcher. In PhDs also, we start with a hypothesis. So the hypothesis will say good, bad, ugly, not a problem at all. Having a hypothesis is not a problem. Having a belief is not a problem. All of us cannot be dispassionate, nor is it required to be, but it is important to be holistic. I think that's an important point. Secondly, we need to be factual. Thankfully, it's absolutely fabulous that Khaki has a wonderful library. Not many charitable libraries exist in the city. You have all the material, okay? Otherwise, you have Petit, you have Asiatic, you have several libraries. Let's be factual. Let's not be into popular or retrospectively fitted in imagination. That's very, very dangerous. Very typically, Angry Fort was one among them. I think we need to accept it was created as a new colonial port city geared to be like a sister city to London's entrepreneurs. It has a different tangent in history than traditional urban histories like Surat, Delhi, Lucknow, Agra, Ajmer, Pune, Kolhapur, Jaipur. Each is different. That's why I put all of them separately. Some of them are imperial capitals, regional capitals, princely states. Some of them are regional trading cities. Each responds differently to colonialism. We responded differently. It's important to understand and research the Indian contribution to Urbs Prima and Indus. Urbs Prima and Indus is, while it sounds Latin, it's not purely British. It is as Indian and as Mumbaikar as much as it was British. We contributed in fields of architecture, administration, judiciary, art, railways, port, trade, banking, industry, medicine, social reform, education. Two very key themes to leave you with. Key theme is communal harmony and peaceful coexistence and co-creation of collective wealth for 3.5 centuries. This is a punchline I want to leave you guys with. Culture of helping each other in public and private, industriousness, professionalism, very, very important. communal harmony and peaceful coexistence. Last word, capital is progress. When you stand at Aram Vada Pav, you look at progress in the front, you look at Urbs Prima on the left. You have Sir Ferosha Mehta looking at Sir Bartle Frere. That is the poignancy of Urbs Prima in this progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venkatesh. And thank you for reiterating about the inclusivity and the collaborative approach that made our city what it is today. I wanted to ask you, where does Calcutta stand, the other big city of the Raj, in terms of inclusivity? Were they also as progressive, inclusive, cosmopolitan as Bombay, as we like to think Bombay is?
I am not an expert on Calcutta, so I can talk to a friend of mine who's an expert. He's a PhD from Exeter. I will get that information and come back to you. But whatever I have been familiarized in Calcutta, because I've not studied about Calcutta in so much detail, it had a lot of elitism. Whether Indian elitism or British, it was not apartheid, but of course, Indian plus British elitism versus the rest of the public. In Bombay, the rest of the public was always important as the feeling I get. Whether because the jute mill labor of Calcutta, even today, because I'm 50 years old now, I've seen people 20, 30 years ago, the jute mill labor will always talk of, strikes and bad things, and he doesn't get food. 20 years before, when I went somewhere to some city, there were workers from Bombay traveling, and happily they would say, "मैं centurion में work करूं." That claiming of common people to the city, whether you're dockyard labor, whether you are an industrial labor, or you're in some other business, I think that inclusiveness probably is very unique to Mumbai. I think that's my feel. I may be wrong. Calcutta I have not studied. It may have been inclusive. I'll figure that out.
So there was another question about another big city on the western coast, on the subcontinent. The question from Yashpal is, how will Karachi compare with Bombay as Urbs Prima?
Sir, that's a good question. Let me send that question out to my friends in other circles. I will definitely come back with an answer on this, because this is something I am myself wanting to know. This is something I'm myself interested to know, because Karachi was also created by Bartle Frere, and Bartle Frere is the co-creator of Bombay, right? So, the first postal stamp, the Sindh postal stamp at all 1854 was done in Sindh. So the port city of Karachi obviously is very, very closely linked to Bombay in terms of the way it responds, because Calcutta is a river port and Bombay is next to the Suez. So obviously it's a seaport, and Karachi is a seaport. So we will, I will try get information on Karachi and Calcutta, sir.
All right. A lot of compliments for you. What a wealth of information. Very informative session. Thank you very much. Wonderful session. So interesting. Thank you. Super session. Venkatesh is always very engaging in each of his talks.
Okay, that's You Too Can Run. That's Mr. Venkat. I know his ID.
Sorry?
You Too Can Run is Mr. Venkat. So I think name is not there. I think his company's name is there.
All right. If there are no more questions, and there are no more questions, I think we'll call it a close. Thank you so much, Venkatesh, for sparing your time. Thank you, audience, for attending today. Please do follow us on social media and attend as many sessions as you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.